invite. This was just a thing of last night when Vaidya wanted me to just speak a few minutes on this subject, how we evolved in the sense. I think most of it has been spoken already, actually. Our journey and rationale in this case. If you look at it, establishing neutral axis is a mantra, which has been not changed. The fundamentals of knee hasn't changed, and it's a proven formula for all seasons, and which is very clear. Conventional instruments works, 90% of us use it, we have been using it, we still continue to use in some cases, but they all had one little pitfall error. That's why the technology and the concepts changed. Most of this uses the bony landmarks, like the intramedullary points, the collateral points, epicondyles. But the problem is with this is that some of them are variable targets and some of them are blind positions. And the variable morphotypes of the femur and the tibia and the interpersonal variation, what is the center of the femur, is quite variable and they vary to various degrees. And if it is very clearly elucidated, if you have a femoral entry point and then you put in the rod to get a long rod or a short rod, even if the long rod is more appropriate, what you would find is there is still a considerable amount of play. 3 to 5 degrees, 6 degrees of femoral anti-torsion can happen, femoral flexion can happen, and depending upon the width of the medullary canal proximally and wherever you put. And that will also translate both on the AP and the mediolateral planes. Second point is if you have a short individual, the angle of divergence from the distal femoral point center to the center of the hip is quite variable. The longer the individual, mechanically I think you would be more central, but the shorter the individual, the variations can increase. And it is now very clearly established also with all our studies that this can be changed. The valgus correction point, our own people have published, Dr. Dhansekar has published and many papers with regard to the medial point of entry on the femur to get it right. But in all this, I think there are two major downsides. One is the appropriate individual component varies and very blindly we have to put it. And whenever you put the component in a little malalignment, that has an impact upon the spaces. So technologies in the OR basically helps one simple thing, I mean keeping it very simple, potential to place the components exactly in the desired position consistently. Is this a very paradigm shift in concepts? No. But because you are able to consistently reproduce this and appropriately place and balance, the function, the longevity and the client satisfaction is far superior in terms of the outcome, in terms of function. But whenever we are adopting any technology, we realized much earlier that expectations of out of the system, what do you expect is very important. The three cardinals before we get baptized into whatever type of thing, whether it's a navigation or whether it is a robot, conviction in the technology, you have to learn to believe the system. Because we are all in the visual range and then whenever we have something deviation doesn't look like, yes it is good to suspect, but we should not constantly suspect the technology and have some conviction, though of course you must counter check. And the perceived benefits, are you convinced it's beneficial either to your surgical procedure or to the outcomes, and a belief in the system. Second thing we always look for, I mean if you see over the time from the 2020 years, 22 years ago which you had, the earlier systems, smooth workflow is something which has happened tremendously, like in Avio and the Cori, I think now we are talking about the changes. Ease of operating. You want the procedure not to take another 40 minutes, but it should be ease, preferably an open system so that if possible, I think you can interchange your prosthetic designs without changing the system as such and not be wedded to one concept. Less clutter and of course versatility. Earlier times the problems of fiddle factor, the reflector arrays used to be corrupted, the blood would matter and all the other issues. We had started with that much before, after the initial things with the debut system. I think we had moved earlier on to the ASMs, right about 2005-06. And the reason again was that it was a very off-the-shelf, very simple system. It was surface-based, the pins were within the range, within the incision. But all it gave was the distal femoral and the proximal femur, very limited in a sense. The drawbacks basically was we did not believe or depend upon that for the sizing, rotation and kinematics, which was still in your hands. I mean, this was like a slow transition. But the alignment failures were less than 0.5% to 1% in most when we studied the initial 200 to 300. And of course, this was followed with us getting into the development of the pre-plan, more as a CT-based, which is a patient-specific jig. Basically, a useful tool if you don't have to invest upon the big expensive hardware, and this was a CT. You had to be image based in this. So you were committed to this with some variation and leeway, but the major controls were still with the surgeon. But of course, all these had a very short shelf life because in a couple of years, they were overrun with the other technologies. But very useful, what we found was all on the femoral side, varied morphological anomalies, post-traumatic situations, gross deformities, metadiaphyseal variations you could look at and then correct it very easily. Or with implants inside, you had only a short distal femur. When you can't put in a medullary rod, I think it's a great tool as a navigation systems. And as the cognizance grew, I think we need to extract more value out of the systems. We moved on using to the GPS, which was one of the another versatile systems, for 3 reasons. One, again, it was that it could give us the position, the sizing very appropriately. In our intraoperative, whatever we are seeing today was feasible in that development. But at the same time, it also incorporated the hip and the shoulders, which was a feasibility much easier. And that was our attraction at that time. Of course, it was dedicated to one sort of a design. And you could play around with the rotations, the angulations, both of the proximal tibia and the distal femur. And this was fairly well. So far, it was concerned to some extent, you could do a decent gap balancing. But then all these dissatisfaction issues came, and then there was a paradigm shift. In a sense, whether our 0-degree alignment in the neutral axis was started getting more and more into question. And we have these sort of various alignment possibilities from the constitutional alignment. In fact, I was saying in the morning, the best sort of natural kinematic alignment is a unicondylar. I sometimes fail to understand we should be using it more and more in a greater percentage. I'm given to understand today in the overall sort of a universe of the total joint replacements in the knee, only 5% is uni, not more. So I think this gives us now looking at the feasibility to improve further the function and the patient satisfaction. It could be a kinematic, or you'd be seeing more of it. I think Dr. Krishnakiran is showing the adjusted kinematic alignment or the adjusted mechanical alignment, various ways. So you can do. The biggest paradigm in most of these sort of alignment concepts was putting femur first. Previously, we would say we'll create a tibial platform and then work on the femur. But the whole thing has now turned topsy-turvy, except for the final adjustments. You get the femur first so that you get your kinematic axis and restore the rest of the anatomy in the corresponding window which you create, a bony window, and adjust the tibial to the parallelism of the femur. That is the reason the 3-degree rotation concept goes off, and you adjust the rotation based upon your mechanical and the functional necessity to restore the joint line and obliquities. But precise planning demands precise execution, like was beautifully demonstrated by Dr. Vaidya now, that I think you need to look at that 1 millimeter or 1 to 2 millimeters cut which you need. And robot here assists in this bone milling and cutting, especially with the Navio. With the milling technique, I think you are much more precise, plan and execute the predictable outcomes. I totally agree with him in the sense, rather than a socket, I think the milling helps us a great deal. But remember one thing, robot does not and is not tuned to any concept. It is how you utilize it. That is one thing which needs not a kinematic align. In fact, today if you say, sometimes the question comes, which one you use? I think it is just that there is a conceptual shift. You use an alignment which is trying to do very minimal soft tissues and adjust between the bone and the soft tissue. And fine-tune this final plan and execute it precisely. That's where the robot comes in. Second reason why probably one will and we will need to shift slowly, which I'm convinced, is that more and more of the partial or the compartmental replacements, either the medial uni, the lateral uni, patellofemoral combination of the two, and staying as anatomic as feasible with tissue and the bone conservations. So selective focal resurfacing is the other necessity that is going to necessitate the use of technology in these cases, the tissue considering. So robot-assisted imageless, I think, in a way takes away the need for a CT, MRI, and we are able to plan and balance it prior to the cuts. That's a great benefit, which even some of the navigation systems would not give before. So achieving the final plans like you saw in the demonstrated beautifully, you can more or less come to that ballpark point, and then you can fine-tune this. And then finally you're able to execute the whole things. When you do this sort of a kinematic or adjusted kinematic, be prepared to see these type of X-rays sometimes. It is not often we are used to it. Immediately we jump to the fact that it is varus. How much is the limits 3, 4, 5, I think that's a question mark. There are some in the world who say up to 6 degrees of a correction they give, but we restrict at this time till we develop more confidence and see the outcomes to about 3 to 4 degrees. Don't jump beyond the margins and the defined limits. So fine tune the balance with the little bony corrections, and still you are doing very well. So at the present time, I think our feeling in the uni condylus, this was one uni which I had done 20 years ago, 2000. The same, it was a fixed bearing uni, and today we do the same thing with the mobile. A little more precision is much better. You're able to execute like you saw in the morning. It takes a lot of brain and calculations in most cases. So long as you know the basic principles, under correct, no release, and just resurface the bone. 3 points, that's about it. So in short, summarizing, enabling technologies and orthopedic surgeons, to me, I think we are made for each other. I think we could use it for the type of surgeries we do, especially in some zones. It's articular reconstruction, replacements, and reproduction of the anatomy. It's here to stay, will impact us in one form or the other. I think the earlier we adopt and refine ourselves, probably it may be better. Certainly these are earlier times. Time will throw more light on it and how it works. But of course the debate will go on, and this is a small statement I read in 2021, last year, coming from Peter Sharkey, Parvezi, and Bob Booth, big guns in the replacements. They still ask, is robot and the hip and knee arthroplasty a real innovation or a marketing tool? I mean, this debate is going to go on, but I don't think this needs to be a factor. Today, if you look at it, the reality of the whole thing, even though you find the top guns talking about the questioning it, it's a robot war, literally in the marketplace. There are variety. Every industry partner today is able to has come out with the varieties. They are everywhere, right from cleaning the house. So why not in the operating room? So enabling technologies and orthopedic surgeons, like I said, we are no exception. More importantly, I think the robots have thrown out so much of data because it is grabbing every information. And what we see coming up in the next years is a predictive analytics. What it does is collects all the data, what is being recorded here, and you can clean it, save it, and then pick up the important, required, necessary ones. Then you can identify the patterns, how it comes. And tomorrow it may be able to tell you that as an ex-surgeon, with this information, with these numbers, he would prefer this type of a procedure. Or in these cases, this type of a system works. And it is able to predict it. So there is a predictive potential which happens. And that is probably just coming. It is on the horizon. So predictive analysis, basically what it's going to do probably in the next years is the AI, literally, smart algorithms in diagnostics, appropriate therapeutic approach, what would be ideal, adjusted, total kinematic, whatever. You do not know how it's going to evolve. It will be we the surgeons thinking about it and probably giving some direction to it. And also it's probably a prediction to what probably would be the anticipated outcomes, what you would see in this case. Thank you.